Most people think healthy eating is a new idea, something a doctor came up with last year, something you read on the back of a package at the grocery store. But long before food labels existed, before hospitals, before any of it, there was a book that already told people exactly what to eat, when to eat it, and why it worked. Not in vague terms, not in general advice, specific meals, tied to specific people, at specific moments when their bodies needed something badly. The Bible. Today we're going through 12 of those meals. Not random dishes someone made up to sound spiritual. Real meals, tied to real stories. A king who was dying and got healed by fruit pressed onto his skin. A poor widow whose flour jar never ran empty. A whole nation that walked through open desert for 40 years on food that fell out of the sky. Stay with us to the end, because meal number 4 is the one that gave a starving, exhausted man so little willpower left that he traded away his entire future for a single bowl of it. And meal number 1 isn't just one food. It's an entire table, one that God laid out piece by piece on the most important night in an entire nation's history. And when you look closely at what was actually on it, it's hard to believe it was put together by accident. And that's really what this whole list is about. Not fancy ingredients, not rare spices flown in from somewhere exotic, just plain, everyday food, eaten by ordinary people at the exact moment their bodies needed it most. 12 meals. Let's get into it. Number 12, honey and locusts, the wilderness survival snack. John the Baptist didn't live in a house. He didn't shop at a market. He lived alone out in the desert, cut off from everything, and the Bible tells us plainly what kept him alive out there: honey and locusts. At first, that sounds like nothing more than a strange detail, but look a little closer, and it's actually one of the smartest survival combinations available to anyone in that world. Wild honey is one of the fastest sources of energy that nature makes. It moves into the bloodstream quickly, and within minutes, it gives a tired body real, usable fuel. It also carries a natural power to fight off germs, which mattered enormously when there was no clean water for miles, and no medicine of any kind nearby. Locusts sound strange to modern ears, but they were a genuine, reliable source of protein for desert people. They were light to carry, easy to catch, and full of exactly the kind of nutrition a body needs to keep working and surviving under a brutal sun, day after day. Put the two together, and you get something remarkably balanced. Fast, quick-burning energy from the honey, long-lasting strength from the protein in the locusts. It's the same basic idea behind an energy bar sold in stores today. Quick sugar paired with real protein, just built thousands of years earlier, using whatever the desert actually had to offer. John didn't have a kitchen, a pantry, or anyone bringing him meals. He had exactly what the wilderness gave him, and somehow, that was enough to keep him alive, strong, and ready for one of the most important callings in the entire Bible. Think about what that actually means. No grocery store, no planning ahead, just 2 simple things pulled straight from the land around him, and his body stayed strong enough to preach, to travel, and to baptize crowds of people out in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes the plainest food, eaten consistently, does more for a body than anything complicated ever could. Number 11, manna and quail, the food that fell from the sky. When the people of Israel left Egypt, they walked straight into a desert with absolutely nothing to eat. No crops growing, no animals to hunt, no stored grain from the years before. Just sand, heat, and a few 100,000 hungry people. So God sent food from the sky. Every single morning, a strange, bread-like substance called manna would appear scattered across the ground like frost. And in the evenings, quail, small, low-flying birds, would come close enough for people to catch by hand. Manna gave the people something a worn-out body desperately needs after walking for miles under a hot sun. Light, simple energy that didn't sit heavy in the stomach and didn't slow anyone down the next day. It didn't spoil quickly either, which meant a family could gather it in the morning and still have something left by midday. The quail filled in exactly what the manna couldn't provide: real protein, real fat, the kind of nutrition the body actually needs to repair and rebuild muscle after another brutal day of walking through open desert. Together, the two made a complete daily meal. Carbs in the morning to start the day with real energy. Protein in the evening to recover overnight and be ready to walk again the next day. Nothing about the timing was random. It was a full system, delivered fresh every single day for a people who had absolutely nothing else to rely on. Some might call it a coincidence that the meal arrived in the exact order the body needed it. After 40 years of it never once failing, coincidence seems like the wrong word. And think about the sheer scale of it. This wasn't feeding one family or one small camp. This was feeding an entire moving nation, day after day, year after year, out in a place where nothing should have been able to grow at all. The food never ran out. It never made anyone sick, and it never once needed a harvest. It simply showed up, exactly when it was needed, exactly in the form the body could use it best. Number 10. Milk and honeycomb, the land flowing with healing. Throughout the Bible, God describes the promised land using one specific phrase, over and over again: a land flowing with milk and honey. That's not just a poetic way of saying the land was nice to look at. It's a description of two of the most healing foods that existed anywhere in that world. Raw milk, especially from goats, was far gentler on the stomach than most people realize today. It carried real protein, calcium for strong bones, and good natural fat, and for a population working hard outdoors from sunrise to sunset, it helped quietly rebuild the body every single night while they slept. Honey, taken straight from the comb, is one of the only foods on earth that essentially never spoils. It soothes a sore, scratchy throat, calms an upset stomach, and gives the body clean, natural sugar instead of anything processed or artificial. Warm milk with a spoonful of raw honey stirred in wasn't just a comforting drink to enjoy before bed. In a world with no medicine cabinets and no pharmacies, this combination genuinely calmed the body, helped people sleep, and gently healed the gut at the same time. It's the same drink grandmothers have quietly made for sick children for generation after generation, long after most people forgot exactly where the idea first came from. It's worth noticing what God chose to compare the entire Promised Land to. Not gold, not fine wine, not rare spices. Milk and honey, two of the plainest, most everyday foods a family could have. The richness of that land wasn't measured in luxury. It was measured in how well it could feed and heal the people living there, day after ordinary day. Number 9. Boaz's roasted grain and bread dipped in vinegar. Ruth's field lunch. In the book of Ruth, a poor widow named Ruth spends her days out in the fields, gathering whatever leftover grain the workers leave behind, just to survive and feed her mother-in-law. A landowner named Boaz notices her working hard and invites her to sit down and eat with his own workers. He hands her bread to dip into a sour wine vinegar, along with a handful of roasted grain to eat alongside it. This wasn't a fancy meal by any measure, but it was exactly what a body doing hard physical labor all day actually needs. The roasted grain gave slow, steady energy that didn't crash halfway through a long, hot afternoon in the field. The bread filled her stomach properly after hours of bending and gathering, and the vinegar quietly did something people back then couldn't have explained. It helped her body process sugar more evenly and made the whole meal easier to digest afterward. Ruth ate until she was completely full. The text even tells us she had food left over, enough to carry home and share with her mother-in-law that same evening. There was nothing luxurious about this lunch. It was simply a working person's meal, handed over with kindness. But it had precisely what an exhausted, hard-working body was craving in that exact moment: real energy, real fullness, and a little extra help digesting it all once the work was done for the day. Ruth wasn't given something rare or special because she was a widow in need. She was given exactly what every field worker ate every single day. And that's really the point. The food that quietly kept an entire working class of people healthy and strong wasn't hidden away for the wealthy. It was sitting right there in the field, available to anyone willing to do the work. Number 8. Raisin cakes, the strength food David gave a whole nation. When King David brought the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, it was one of the largest, most joyful celebrations recorded anywhere in the Bible. And when the celebration finally ended, David didn't hand out gold or wine or anything expensive to the massive crowd that had gathered. He gave every single person present a cake made of pressed raisins. That might sound like an oddly plain gift for such a massive occasion, but raisins were actually one of the most trusted, dependable energy foods of the entire ancient world. Dried grapes hold on to almost all of their natural sugar and nutrition, just packed into a smaller, far more concentrated form that's easy to carry. They gave tired people quick, usable energy after a long day of walking, singing, and celebrating in the sun. They're also naturally rich in iron, which helps prevent the kind of deep, dragging tiredness that follows a big physical effort. And because they were dried, they could be carried anywhere, stored for months without spoiling, and handed out to thousands of people at once without a single one going to waste. Pressed together into a cake, raisins became something a person could genuinely survive on for an entire day if needed. Light enough to carry in one hand, quick enough to eat on the move, and strong enough to keep a tired body going until the next real meal. David wasn't only celebrating a historic moment that day. Whether he fully understood the reason or not, he was refueling an entire exhausted nation using one of the smartest, most efficient energy foods available anywhere in his world. Picture the scene for a second. Thousands of people, tired from hours of singing, dancing, and walking behind the ark under the sun, and instead of just letting them wander home hungry, David made sure every single one of them left with something in their hands that would actually carry them the rest of the way. Small gesture. Big impact. Number 7. Widow's oil and flour cakes, the jar that never ran dry. During a brutal famine, the prophet Elijah crosses paths with a widow who has almost nothing left to her name, just a small handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. She tells him she's planning to cook one final small meal for herself and her son, and then simply wait to starve. Elijah asks her to bake him a small cake first, and promises that her flour and oil will not run out until the famine finally ends. She does exactly as he says, and it happens precisely the way he told her it would. Setting the miracle aside for a moment, look closely at what she was actually cooking. Flour and olive oil, mixed together and cooked into a simple, thin flatbread over an open fire. That plain combination is far more powerful than it looks on the surface. The olive oil helps the body properly absorb and use everything good hidden inside the flour. It also has its own naturally calming effect on the body, which mattered even more during a famine, when fear and hunger were both quietly wearing this widow down day after day. Together, flour and oil made a complete, genuinely filling food using almost nothing at all, light to prepare, gentle on an already stressed stomach, and enough to keep 2 people alive day after day when there was truly nothing else left on the shelf. The widow didn't just survive because the jar of oil miraculously never ran empty. She survived because the meal itself, small and plain as it was, gave her exhausted, frightened body exactly what it needed to keep going one more day, and then another after that. There's something worth sitting with here. She thought she had nothing left to offer anyone, not even herself, but the little she did have, flour and oil, turned out to be more than enough, day after day, for as long as she needed it. Sometimes what looks like almost nothing is actually a complete meal, waiting to be used. Number 6. Fig poultice meal, the fruit that healed a king. King Hezekiah was seriously ill, suffering from a painful, infected wound that simply wouldn't close on its own. The prophet Isaiah didn't only pray on his behalf. He instructed the king's own servants to press a thick paste made from crushed figs directly onto the wound itself. The king recovered fully. Doctors studying this today have actually looked closely at figs, and it turns out they genuinely do carry natural substances that help wounds close faster and help fight off infection. Isaiah's instructions weren't simply a spiritual gesture for comfort. They were medically sound advice, thousands of years before anyone had the tools to explain exactly why it worked. But figs weren't only useful pressed onto a wound. Eaten as an everyday food, they're one of the most mineral-packed fruits that existed anywhere in the ancient world. They're rich in natural fiber that keeps digestion running smoothly, along with the kind of minerals that keep bones strong and energy levels steady throughout a long, hard day. In a world with no daily vitamins on a shelf, a simple handful of figs quietly did the job of several of them all at once, every single day, without anyone thinking twice about it. Hezekiah's recovery is remembered as a genuine miracle, and it absolutely was. But it's also a quiet reminder that the fruit itself, used the right way, was already carrying real healing power long before anyone needed a miracle to notice it. It's easy to read past this story quickly and miss the detail entirely. A dying king, and the instruction given wasn't a strange ritual or an unusual remedy. It was fruit. Something growing on trees all across the land. Something ordinary families were already eating every day without a second thought. Something. If you're starting to notice just how much wisdom is quietly packed into these old stories, go ahead and tap that like button and hit subscribe while you're at it. There are 6 more meals still coming, and honestly, the biggest ones on this entire list are still ahead of us. Number 5. Barley loaves and fish, the feeding of the 5,000. A massive crowd had followed Jesus far out into a remote, empty area, with no food anywhere in sight and no real way to get any. All that could be found among the entire crowd was one small boy's packed lunch, 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. Jesus took that tiny, humble meal, blessed it, and somehow it fed a crowd of thousands, with baskets of food left over afterward. Setting the miracle itself aside for just a moment, look closely at what that little meal was actually made of. Barley bread paired with fish is, even by today's standards, remarkably close to a perfectly balanced meal. Barley is one of the most filling grains that exists anywhere. It digests slowly, keeps a person feeling full for hours at a stretch, and helps keep blood sugar steady instead of spiking hard and then crashing an hour later. It was the everyday grain of ordinary working people, farmers, fishermen, soldiers, precisely because it kept them going through long, physically demanding days. Fish brought something barley alone. They also carry a natural cleansing quality that helps the body clear out what it doesn't need, along with good natural fats that genuinely support the heart and the brain. Multiplied out across that entire hungry crowd, this simple, humble combination properly fed and nourished thousands of tired, hungry people in a single sitting. This moment is remembered as one of the greatest miracles in the whole Bible, and it deserves to be. But it's worth noticing that even the food chosen for that miracle wasn't picked at random. It was already the single most complete meal available in that moment. It simply needed to go a very, very long way. Out of everything that little boy could have packed that day, he happened to be carrying the one combination that could actually sustain a tired, hungry crowd sitting out in the open for hours. Grain for lasting energy. Fish for real strength. Small enough to carry in 2 hands, yet somehow enough for thousands. Number 4. Esau's red lentil stew, the meal worth more than a birthright. Esau came in from a long day working out in the field, completely exhausted and genuinely starving, and found his brother Jacob cooking a thick stew made of red lentils. He wanted a bowl of it so badly, right in that moment, that he agreed to trade away his entire birthright, his future inheritance, just for a single serving of it. That decision gets almost all of the attention whenever this story is told. But the stew itself deserves a much closer look. Lentils are one of the most powerful foods a truly exhausted, depleted body can eat. They're heavily loaded with iron, which happens to be exactly what a worn-out, drained body is often quietly missing after a long, hard day. They also digest slowly, which means the energy they give doesn't disappear in 20 minutes the way a quick snack would. It genuinely lasts for hours afterward. For a man who had been working outside all day with absolutely nothing in his stomach, A bowl of thick red lentil stew wasn't just comforting. It was almost exactly what his depleted body was craving, right down to the chemistry of it, fast enough to properly satisfy real, urgent hunger, but built to keep him steady and full for hours once he finally sat down to eat. Esau's choice looks foolish from the outside, looking back on it now, but his body genuinely wasn't lying to him in that moment. It truly needed what was sitting in that pot, badly enough that nothing else in the entire world felt like it mattered more right then. Sometimes the food your body is quietly begging for is trying to tell you something real about what it's missing. Number 3. Bitter herbs and unleavened bread. The Passover detox plate. On the very last night before Israel left Egypt for good, God gave extremely specific instructions for the meal every family was to eat that evening. Alongside roasted lamb, they were told to eat bitter herbs and bread made completely without yeast. This wasn't only symbolic. Both parts of that meal were doing genuine, practical work on the body. Bitter herbs, the kind still used at Passover tables today, wake up digestion almost immediately. They get the stomach and gut properly working, which matters enormously right before eating a large, rich meal like roasted lamb. The unleavened bread, a flat bread made quickly, without any yeast at all, was noticeably lighter and gentler on the stomach than regular risen bread. It didn't sit heavy afterward, and it didn't slow anyone down physically, which mattered enormously since this entire nation needed to be ready to leave in a hurry, at a moment's notice. Together, the bitter herbs and the simple flatbread did something genuinely clever. They prepared the body to properly take in and use the rich, heavy lamb that was served alongside them, without leaving a single person feeling sick, sluggish, or weighed down afterward. This was a meal deliberately built for one specific, unrepeatable moment, a night that needed every single body in that nation working at its absolute best, with nothing at all weighing it down. Every family in Israel ate this same combination that same night, in every single home, at the exact same time. Not because it was convenient, because it worked, and because that night there was absolutely no room for anything to go wrong. Number 2. Roasted lamb with herbs, the centerpiece of the Passover table. Lamb sits right at the center of one of the single most important meals recorded anywhere in the entire Bible. On the night of that first Passover, every family in Israel was instructed to roast a whole lamb and eat it together as one household, before setting out on their long journey out of Egypt. This wasn't only about the deep meaning carried behind it. The lamb itself gave these people exactly what their bodies genuinely needed for what was coming next. Roasted lamb is rich in the kind of protein and iron a body absorbs easily, far more easily than what you'd typically get from most plant-based foods. For a people about to walk for days through open, unforgiving desert, that mattered enormously. It rebuilds tired, worn muscle, restores lost energy, and gives the body real, lasting staying power for the road ahead. Roasting the lamb over specific herbs added even more benefit on top of that. Herbs commonly used in that region carry a natural ability to fight off harmful germs, and they also help make heavy, rich meat noticeably easier for the stomach to break down and properly use. This meal wasn't simply a farewell dinner shared the night before a long trip. It was fuel, deliberately made rich, and deliberately made filling, given to an entire nation the night before they needed real physical strength to walk out of the only home most of them had ever known. Sometimes the single most important meal of your life turns out to be, quietly, the most practical one you'll ever eat. Number 1. The full Passover table. Lamb, bread, herbs, and wine together. And here is the meal that ties every single one of these together. God didn't simply instruct the Israelites to eat roasted lamb by itself. He gave them an entire table: lamb, bitter herbs, unleavened bread, and wine, all eaten together in one sitting on one of the most important nights in their entire history as a people. Looked at one piece at a time, each part of this meal is genuinely powerful on its own, exactly the way we've already seen across the last two meals on this list. But looked at as one complete table, laid out together, something remarkable starts to happen. The lamb brings protein and iron that rebuilds a tired, worn-down body from the inside out. The bitter herbs prepare the stomach ahead of time to properly handle that rich, heavy meat. The unleavened bread fills the stomach without weighing anyone down or leaving them sluggish for the road ahead. And the wine, taken in a small, careful amount, carries its own naturally calming effect on the body, while helping everything else at the table digest more smoothly and completely. Nothing on that table was placed there by accident. Each piece quietly supports the piece sitting right next to it. The herbs make the lamb easier to digest. The bread balances out the richness of the meat, and the wine ties the entire meal together, calming the body after such a rich and heavy dinner. This is the exact meal an entire nation sat down and ate together, the night before they walked out of slavery and into a future none of them could fully see yet. It wasn't a light snack thrown together at the last minute. It wasn't only a symbolic gesture either. It was a full, complete, carefully built table, deliberately designed to give tired, frightened, exhausted people exactly what their bodies needed to find the strength for the very next step in front of them. 12 meals, spread across thousands of years, and dozens of completely different lives, all of them quietly pointing back to the exact same simple truth. Long before anyone fully understood how the human body actually works, someone already did, and wrote it all down, one meal at a time, for anyone willing to pay close enough attention. The people eating these meals didn't need to understand a single one of the reasons behind them. They simply knew, meal after meal, generation after generation, that these foods worked when it truly mattered. Maybe, all these years later, that's still worth paying close attention to. If one of these 12 meals genuinely stood out to you, drop it in the comments below. I'd honestly love to know which one you're planning to try first. And if this opened your eyes to something you genuinely never noticed before, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, because there's a lot more quietly hiding inside these old pages that we haven't uncovered together just yet.